Chapter 1. A New Journey Begins. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was released in 2024, developed and published by Square Enix. It is the second major chapter in the Final Fantasy VII Remake project, continuing the reimagining of one of the most influential role-playing stories ever made. The project carries the long shadow of the original 1997 game, while also being shaped by the modern Square Enix team led by longtime creative figures associated with the series, including Tetsuya Nomura, Yoshinori Kitase, and Naoki Hamaguchi. Rebirth expands the world far beyond the city of Midgar, turning a familiar escape into a vast road story filled with memory, mystery, and loss. The tale begins with the aftermath of the escape from the Shinra-controlled metropolis. Cloud Strife, once a soldier hopeful and now a mercenary with a fractured sense of self, travels with a small resistance group that has become something more than a political cause. Barrett Wallace carries the rage of a father and a rebel leader. Tifa Lockhart offers warmth, steadiness, and a quiet hope that Cloud may still be the boy she once knew. Aerith Gainsborough, tied to the land, the planet, and a hidden ancient heritage, moves through the world with an almost unsettling grace. Red 13, a creature of wisdom and memory, joins them as both guide and witness. Yuffie Kisaragi, a young ninja from Wutai, eventually adds her own restless energy to the company. Their bond is fragile, shaped by trust and by the trauma that still clings to each of them. The larger world they enter is under the long reach of Shinra Electric Power Company, whose exploitation of the planet's lifeblood has poisoned both land and society. Mako energy powers cities and weapons, but it also drains the world itself. Beneath that struggle lies an older wound, the legend of Sephiroth, the celebrated war hero who became a symbol of disaster after falling into madness. Cloud's group travels with the hope of learning more about him, stopping Shinra's pursuit, and finding a way to protect Aerith from the danger she seems to attract simply by existing. Rebirth is built around motion, companionship, and uncertainty. The party moves from place to place across grasslands, coastlines, mountains, and ancient ruins, and each new region reveals another layer of the planet's history. What begins as a pursuit soon becomes a pilgrimage across a living world. Memories fail, identities blur, and the line between fate and choice grows thinner with every step. The game's story is not only about saving the world, it is about remembering what it means to live in it. The journey opens the larger mythology of Final Fantasy VII, the planet as a wounded being, the life stream as the flow of all life and memory, the Cetra as a lost people who once listened to the world, and the shadow of Genova, an alien calamity whose influence has twisted history for centuries. In Rebirth, all of these forces converge as Cloud and his allies cross the world in search of Sephiroth and the truth behind the disasters following in his wake. The result is a story of spectacle and sorrow, but also of tenderness. For all the cosmic scale of its mythology, Rebirth remains focused on small human moments. A look exchanged between friends, a memory that will not settle, a promise made in fear, and the question of whether the future can be chosen even when the past refuses to stay buried. Chapter 2. Escape into the wider world. The story resumes with the aftermath of Midgar's collapse and the pursuit that follows. Cloud and the others set out from the city's shadow into the open lands beyond, carrying the burden of what they have learned and what they have not yet understood. Their escape from Shinra is only the beginning. Sephiroth, no longer merely a memory from Cloud's past, appears to be moving through the world with a purpose that reaches beyond simple revenge. His presence bends events around him, and wherever the party travels, his influence seems to arrive first. The world outside Midgar is far larger than the steel corridors and slums that once defined the story. Vast grasslands stretch beneath open skies, broken by farms, outposts, and isolated settlements. The change in scale matters. The party is no longer trapped inside a machine that consumes the planet from within. They are now wandering through the planet itself, through places where ordinary people live with the consequences of Shinra's power and the uncertainty of war. The journey becomes both an exploration and a reckoning. Every region reflects some aspect of the world's struggle: industrial ruin, civic fear, cultural division, and the quiet endurance of the people who remain. Cloud remains the center of the party's unease. He speaks with confidence, fights with fierce skill, and presents himself as an elite former soldier. Yet there are fractures in his memory and behavior that make the others wary. Tifa, who has known him since childhood, watches him closely and senses that the man beside her is both familiar and deeply altered. Aerith notices something strange in Cloud too, as if his mind is being pulled in competing directions. Their relationship is gentle, but also burdened by the sense that Cloud himself may be lost to a story he no longer fully owns. Barrett continues to drive the group forward with direct purpose. He is a man defined by what he has lost, especially his home and his daughter, Marlene. Yet his anger is not empty. It is rooted in grief, responsibility, and a hard-earned understanding that rebellion without care becomes only another kind of destruction. His presence gives the journey weight, because he sees the world in terms of what Shinra has taken from common people. He does not allow the larger mystery to erase the immediate cruelty of the company's power. Aerith, meanwhile, moves with quiet certainty. She knows more than she says, and the world responds to her in ways that suggest a deep bond with the planet. Her connection to the Cetra and to the Lifestream makes her both vulnerable and essential. She is not simply a guide. She is a living bridge between forgotten history and the future that may depend on remembering it. Around her, the journey feels less like a chase and more like a summons. As the group advances, the shadow of Shinra remains constant. The company seeks to control information, energy, and fear. Its soldiers and researchers pursue their own hidden goals, including a growing interest in ancient powers and the remains of vanished civilizations. The party begins to sense that the conflict is no longer limited to corporate greed. Something older and more catastrophic is moving beneath the surface. Sephiroth, Genova, the Cetra, and the planet itself all seem connected by a chain of calamity stretching far beyond recent history. The wider world does not bring clarity at first, it brings questions. Every town holds local fears. Every road suggests a lost story. The group's unity is tested by mistrust, by secrets, and by the pressure of a future none of them can clearly see. Yet the act of traveling together slowly deepens their bonds. Rebirth uses that journey to turn a set of allies into a fragile family, one held together not by certainty, but by the decision to keep moving forward. Chapter 3. Across Grasslands and Memories. The earliest chapters of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth set the tone for everything that follows. The journey begins in motion, with travel, discovery, and the slow revealing of each character's inner life. Outside Midgar, the Grasslands become the setting for first trials and quiet conversations. The party is no longer just a collection of people trying to survive. They hunt monsters together, rest by campfires, and begin to notice that each of them is carrying a different version of the truth. Cloud stands at the center of that uncertainty. He presents himself with a polished confidence, but the others can feel the gaps beneath the surface. Some of his memories seem unnaturally smooth. Others are missing altogether. He knows things he should not know, and forgets things he should not forget. Even when he speaks with certainty, there is a sense that something is not fully aligned. The deeper the journey goes, the more his behavior feels like a reflection of a life assembled from pieces that do not quite fit. Tifa becomes the emotional anchor of this part of the story. She is careful, empathetic, and highly observant. Because she knew Cloud before all of this, she is in a unique and painful position. She remembers the boy he used to be, and that memory does not match the soldier he now claims to be. This creates a quiet sadness in their interactions. Tifa wants to trust him, but she also fears what the truth might mean. Her concern is personal, rooted in shared history, shared loss, and the possibility that the person standing before her may be built from fragments of someone else's life. Aerith offers a different kind of support. She does not force the issue when Cloud behaves strangely, but she understands more than she says. Her kindness is not simple innocence. It is a deliberate kind of strength, shaped by an awareness of how people survive pain. As the group travels farther from Midgar, she becomes central to the mood of the story. She brings warmth into a world filled with dread, but that warmth is touched by melancholy. She often seems to understand that the future is narrowing around her, even while she speaks about ordinary things with calm ease. Barrett's role also grows in these early chapters. His roughness remains, but it begins to sit beside a stronger protective instinct. He argues, he complains, and he pushes back, yet he is always watching over the group. His attention often turns to Marlene, even from far away, and that detail gives his character greater weight. He is not only a revolutionary leader anymore, he is also a father, trying to make sure the next generation survives what the current one has broken. Through him, the game keeps its political and personal stakes closely linked. The planet is not just a cause to fight for. It is a place where children are raised, families are damaged, and people struggle to build meaning under systems that treat their lives as disposable. As the party moves through the open world, there is also the growing sense that they are being watched. Sephiroth's appearances do not feel random. They feel like disturbances in the shape of reality itself. His presence brings confusion, violence, and a deep sense that Cloud is especially vulnerable to manipulation. The line between outside threat and inner memory begins to weaken. Cloud sees things no one else sees, and at times he reacts as if he has already lived through events that are still unfolding. That uncertainty connects the personal story to the larger mythology of Final Fantasy VII. Cloud's identity crisis is not just a private struggle. It is tied to a wider history of memory, cloning, experimentation, and spiritual influence. Shinra's experiments with Genova cells created bodies and identities that were never fully stable. Sephiroth stands as the most tragic outcome of that ambition, a legendary warrior shaped by artificial interference and then consumed by it. Cloud, without understanding the full truth, walks in the shadow of that same legacy. Even the ordinary places in the world carry this history. Settlements built around trade and survival still bear the influence of Shinra's reach. Ruins remind the party that civilization here is layered over older destruction. The past is never gone. It lingers in the soil, in the roads, and in the broken spaces between towns. In that way, Rebirth turns travel into a form of archaeology. Every new path reveals another layer of a wound that is never fully healed. What gives these early chapters their lasting weight is the balance between wonder and unease. The party has room to breathe. They share meals, they joke, they argue, and they find small victories along the way. Those moments matter because they make the world feel lived in. But beneath that calm, the story keeps pressing on the same questions. Who is Cloud really? What does Aerith understand? Why does Sephiroth seem so invested in the shape of their future? The answers stay out of reach for now, and that is part of the power of the opening stretch. Rebirth does not rush to explain itself. Instead, it lets the journey build slowly, one encounter at a time. It creates a feeling of movement through a world full of memory, grief, and quiet warning. The road ahead is still open, but it is already clear that every step carries history with it. Chapter 4. The Shapes of the Party. As the journey continues, each member of the party becomes clearer through their choices, their loyalties, and the way they respond to the world around them. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth gives unusual care to these relationships, allowing quiet moments to breathe beside the larger battles. Because of that, the group never feels like a set of combat roles or familiar archetypes. They feel like people who have already lived through enough to change one another simply by traveling together. Their histories meet, and every new stop on the road carries the weight of that collision. Tifa and Cloud remain the emotional center of the party. Tifa's gentleness is not weakness. She understands that memory can bend and fracture under pressure, and she sees the loneliness hidden beneath Cloud's calm exterior. Her grief is private, but it shapes the patience she offers him. She wants to believe that Cloud can be restored, even if that means facing painful truths about the past. Cloud, in turn, is drawn to her familiarity, but he often cannot give her the openness she needs. What they share is intimate and unfinished, held in place by trauma and uncertainty. Aerith's bond with the others feels different. She speaks with a directness that can seem almost disarming, and she often appears to know where a conversation is headed before it reaches that point. Her connection with Cloud is especially complicated. She teases him, trusts him in moments when others hesitate, and seems to sense the danger surrounding his mind. At the same time, there is always a distance in her gaze, as if she is already aware of a road the others cannot yet see. That awareness gives her scenes with the party a quiet ache. She is there, fully present, and yet she also feels touched by something beyond the moment. Barrett grows warmer as the journey unfolds. His frustration still rises quickly, but he is also a source of humor and practical steadiness. His devotion to Marlene and his broader sense of responsibility reveal a man who has learned to survive by making himself impossible to ignore. He distrusts Shinra with good reason, but he also begins to trust the people walking beside him. In that change, his revolutionary anger becomes something deeper and more enduring. It becomes care with conviction behind it. Red 13 brings a different presence altogether. He carries an ancient perspective, even in a young body. His knowledge of the planet and its history makes him a witness to long suffering and long memory. He understands that human politics exist within a larger balance of ecology and spirit. His nature as both beast and sage gives depth to the party's conversations, especially when the subject turns to memory and legacy. He reminds the group that history does not vanish. It remains in the land, in the creatures that inhabit it, and in the places shaped by what came before. Yuffie Kisaragi adds speed, mischief, and cultural tension. As a ninja from Wutai, she carries the burden of a homeland that resisted Shinra and was forced into uneasy submission. Her humor and ambition can make her seem light-hearted at first, but her story is grounded in national loss and the desire to reclaim what was taken. Within the party, she brings a sharper awareness of what Shinra's expansion has done beyond the edges of Midgar. The company is not only draining the planet, it is also an engine of conquest. The road structure of Rebirth lets these personalities emerge through action as much as through dialogue. A hard battle, a playful detour, a shared meal, or a moment of silence can reveal more than a speech ever could. Over time, the party becomes indispensable to itself. They do not stop disagreeing, and their differences are never erased. Instead, those differences become the shape of their bond. They learn one another through friction, through patience, and through the simple fact of continuing forward together. This human texture matters because the larger mythology of rebirth is so vast. Ancient ruins, planetary memory, strange experiments, and the possibility that reality itself may be unstable all press against the journey. Without the grounding of these relationships, that scale could become distant and abstract. Instead, every revelation lands against a background of trust, fear, and lingering doubt. The cosmic and the personal stay linked because the people at the center of the story are always present when the mysteries deepen. By the middle of the journey, the party feels like a fragile answer to the world's violence. They are flawed, grieving, stubborn, and sometimes lost, but they keep moving. That persistence becomes its own kind of law. The fate of the planet will depend not only on ancient powers or corporate armies, but on whether these people can understand one another before the world breaks apart around them. Chapter 5. Shinra, Wutai, and the Politics of Power. Rebirth never forgets that its fantasy world is also a political one. Shinra's influence reaches far beyond the energy grid of Midgar. The company controls territory, information, weapons research, and the language of progress itself. It has presented its own power as necessary modernization, but beneath that claim lies exploitation. Towns have been folded into its systems, landscapes reshaped, and entire cultures pressured into submission or obscurity. The journey reveals a world where corporate authority and military force are inseparable. Wutai stands as one of the clearest symbols of resistance. Once a proud nation, it was defeated in war and reduced in standing by Shinra's expansion. Yuffie's presence gives this history a living face. She is impulsive and often comic, but her motivations are serious. She wants to restore honor to her homeland and recover what Shinra took. Through her, the game explores how occupation becomes personal, how national shame is carried by young people who inherit defeats they did not choose. Wutai is more than a setting. It is a memory of the world before Shinra's dominance hardened into normality. The tension between Shinra and the wider world also appears through rival factions, private interests, and local authorities who are forced to adapt to the company's reach. Some people collaborate out of fear, some out of profit, and some simply to keep their communities alive. Rebirth understands that empire is sustained not only by soldiers, but by compromise. This gives the setting a lived-in realism. There are no simple sides, only different forms of compromise and resistance. Barrett's personal hatred of Shinra remains one of the clearest emotional expressions of this broader conflict. He has seen what the company does to workers, families, and neighborhoods. His grief over the destruction of his home and the threat to his daughter grounds the story's politics in domestic pain. Yet, as the journey goes on, he also learns that rage alone cannot sustain a future. He must think beyond retaliation. That growth is one of the game's most important undercurrents. Tifa's perspective is quieter, but equally significant. She knows what it means to lose a place and then try to preserve its memory. Her ties to Nibelheim and to the childhood she shared with Cloud give her a sense of how easily the past can be rewritten. She values truth not as an abstract ideal, but as a way to keep people from being erased. Her caution toward Shinra is therefore also a caution toward forgetting. Shinra itself is depicted as both absurd and terrifying. Its executives can be petty, theatrical, and self-important, but they are also dangerous because they control systems that shape everyday life. They are not villains in the remote sense of myth. They are administrators of suffering. That distinction matters. The game's world has been made unstable by a company that treats the planet as a fuel source and history as a tool. The political layer of the story becomes especially important once the party begins encountering signs of a broader crisis. Shinra's pursuit of ancient knowledge is not curiosity for its own sake. It is a strategy of control. The company wants to harness the planet's deepest powers, even as it helps drive the world toward collapse. Its ambitions intersect with Sephiroth's in frightening ways, because both seek to reach beneath the living surface of the world and redirect it toward their own end. In this sense, Rebirth connects corporate power, colonial conquest, and metaphysical catastrophe into a single web. Shinra's rule is not separate from the cosmic threat. It is one of the conditions that allowed that threat to grow. The party's resistance, then, is also multi-level. They fight machines, soldiers, lies, and the history that made those things possible. The game's politics are never detached from emotion. Every ruined town, every guarded border, and every stolen future speaks to the same truth. Power in this world is built by taking from others. What makes the heroes compelling is that they increasingly understand this. Their mission is not only to stop a disaster, it is to imagine a world in which such disaster is no longer profitable. Chapter 6. Cloud Under the Surface. Cloud's instability becomes more troubling as the journey continues. He is not simply forgetful, distant, or hard to read. At times, he seems to exist just slightly out of step with everyone around him. He reacts to names and images with a tension he cannot explain, as if some part of his mind is trying to protect him from memories that do not fit together properly. The others notice these moments, even if they cannot fully understand them. Cloud still seems capable enough to lead, but the cracks in that appearance grow harder to ignore. The roots of this problem reach deep into the larger history of Final Fantasy VII. Long before the events of Rebirth, Shinra began experimenting with Genova cells, an alien substance tied to infection, imitation, and the corruption of identity. Soldiers, scientists, and entire programs were shaped by this attempt to control something beyond human understanding. That history leaves scars across the world and across the people caught in it. Sephiroth's fall is bound to it. So is Cloud's. Cloud was never simply the soldier he says he was. His body and mind were altered by trauma, experimentation, and the instinct to survive. What remains inside him is not a clean set of memories, but a damaged mixture of his own life and another one that was forced to take shape in its place. Rebirth does not explain this truth outright, but it keeps circling it, letting it press against the surface of the story again and again. That is part of what makes Cloud so unsettling here. His confusion is not random, it is central. He is a man built around a break in memory, a person trying to stand upright while something essential inside him has been split apart. He can still act with confidence, he can still speak like a leader, but the strain behind that performance is always close. Zack Fair hangs over this mystery like a missing piece. His name, his presence, and the sense that something has been overwritten all matter, even when the game does not fully explain them. Cloud's relationship to Zack is not a side note. It is one of the keys to understanding why Cloud feels both familiar and unreachable at the same time. The overlap between them creates an emotional weight that quietly shapes everything around him. Cloud's confusion becomes a symbol of the larger truth that his identity has been disturbed at its core. Tifa understands part of this, though not all of it. She remembers the childhood Cloud wants to connect to, but the man standing before her does not always match the person in her memories. That mismatch leaves her torn between trust and fear. Aerith approaches Cloud in a different way. She seems to sense more than she says, and there is a quiet tenderness in how she responds to him. She does not treat him as if he is simply broken. Instead, she accepts that he is fragmented and still worth caring for. Sephiroth deepens all of this. He is not only an enemy in the physical sense, he also unsettles memory, perception, and the fragile borders of selfhood. Whenever he appears, Cloud's sense of stability weakens. The line between past and present begins to blur. The line between who Cloud is and what has been forced upon him starts to fade. Sephiroth seems to know exactly where Cloud is most vulnerable, and he presses into that weakness with purpose. Their connection is more than rivalry. It is an inheritance of trauma, ambition, and identity twisted beyond recognition. This is what gives Rebirth so much of its uneasy emotional tone. The group around Cloud cannot fully trust the reality they share because one of their own may be seeing something different from everyone else. Even so, they continue to rely on him. He is powerful, he is important, and beneath all the distortion, there is still a real person trying to hold himself together. That tension makes every success feel fragile. Cloud saves others while quietly losing pieces of himself. The quieter moments become especially meaningful because of this. A joke, a pause, a glance before a battle, all of them carry an unspoken question. Is Cloud truly present in the way his companions need him to be? The answer is never simple. He is there, but not whole. He is close, but not fully aligned with the world around him. That incompleteness is tragic, but it is also what keeps the mystery alive. By this point, Rebirth makes it clear that the real struggle is not only against Shinra or Sephiroth. It is also a struggle against the theft of identity, against the way memory can be stolen, rewritten, or buried under another life. Cloud's search for himself mirrors the world's own broken history. His confusion reflects a larger wound in the planet, one that has been carried forward through time and suffering. In that sense, Cloud's journey is not just a personal tragedy. It is one of the most intimate expressions of the story's deepest scars. Chapter 7. Ancient Places, Living Echoes. As the party pushes deeper into the world, the land itself begins to feel like a record of older lives. Rebirth gives great importance to ancient places, shrines, ruins, forgotten passages, and sites where the planet's memory remains unusually strong. These places are not simply background. They are proof that the world remembers even when people do not. The Cetra, the race once known for their communion with the planet, survive now mostly as legend, but their traces shape the journey at every step. Aerith's connection to this history is central. She is one of the last living heirs of Cetra lineage, and the game treats this not as a ceremonial title, but as a burden of awareness. She can sense the planet's distress. She understands that the life stream is more than energy. It is the circulation of life, memory, and return. To be near her is to be reminded that death and continuity are intertwined in this world. Her calm often comes from this deeper understanding, though it also isolates her. She lives with knowledge no one else fully shares. The ancient sites the party encounters reinforce that theme. They suggest that civilization has risen and fallen before, and that the current age of machinery and expansion is only one layer in a much older cycle. The planet has been wounded by more than one catastrophe. Genova's arrival long ago introduced an alien sickness that disrupted the world's natural balance. Shinra's exploitation has since deepened that damage. The ruins around the party are therefore not relics of a dead past. They are warnings. Red 13 is especially attuned to these echoes. He carries the dignity of a witness, and his understanding of the planet makes him one of the most thoughtful members of the group. His perspective is valuable because he does not separate ecology from spirituality. To him, the land is alive in a literal and sacred sense. When the party enters an ancient place, he recognizes it not as a museum piece, but as a living memory. That outlook gives the game a solemn, almost ritual quality in these sections. Cloud and Tifa respond to these spaces differently. Cloud tends to treat them as mission sites at first, but the more he is drawn into the mythic scale of the journey, the more destabilized he becomes. The world's ancient logic seems to call something out of him. Tifa watches this with increasing concern. She is careful not to say too much too early, but her fear is unmistakable. If Cloud is being pulled by a memory not his own, then these sacred or ruined places may be where the illusion begins to unravel. The party's encounters with remnants of the past also broaden the emotional arc of the game. Rebirth is not only about progress, it is about inheritance. The characters are walking through the aftermath of choices made by ancestors, institutions, and forces far beyond their control. That can feel suffocating, but it also creates urgency. If the old cycles are not understood, they will repeat. If the planet's memory is ignored, the same destruction will return in a new form. The lore deepens as the party learns that Sephiroth's goals appear to reach into these ancient systems. He is not merely chasing power in the ordinary sense, he wants influence over the deepest structures of the planet, perhaps even over the boundary between life and calamity itself. His obsession with transcendence turns the old ruins into battlegrounds of meaning. What the Cetra once protected, he seeks to dominate. Aerith's role in this is both hopeful and tragic. She can feel the old language of the world, and the world seems to recognize her in return. Yet that bond marks her as a target. The closer she comes to understanding the planet's memories, the more dangerous her path becomes. Her presence among the party lends the story a sacred fragility. She is not only a companion, she is a living key to a history that others are trying to force open. These ancient spaces remind the party that the world is not theirs to own. It is something they move through, learn from, and try not to damage further. That lesson, repeated in stone and ruin, becomes one of the quiet truths of rebirth. Every step forward must be made with the memory of what was broken before. Chapter 8. Shadows of the Black Material. The chase for Sephiroth is also a chase for answers about the Black Materia, a powerful relic tied to ancient, cataclysmic forces. In the world's lore, materia are crystallized forms of magical and spiritual power, drawn from the planet itself. Most are tools, but the Black Materia is different. It is associated with a destructive calling so severe that its use could bring disaster on a planetary scale. Its existence adds a terrible shape to the story, because it suggests that catastrophe may be planned rather than merely feared. Sephiroth's interest in this relic reveals the scale of his ambition. He is no longer content with personal revenge or the manipulation of a few lives. He seeks an outcome that reaches the planet's core. His worldview is rooted in rejection of ordinary human limits. Where others see balance, he sees vulnerability. Where others see life, he sees a system that can be bent toward his own transformation. The Black Materia becomes the symbol of that desire to force the universe to recognize him. Cloud's connection to Sephiroth grows increasingly unbearable during this portion of the journey. Their encounters feel intimate and predatory, as if Sephiroth is speaking directly into the weakest layers of Cloud's mind. The manipulations around Cloud suggest that his sense of self can be redirected, not just through memory, but through suggestion, pressure, and the expectations built into his past. This is where the law of identity theft and spiritual corruption reaches its most personal expression. Cloud is being used as a pathway. Tifa's concern intensifies, and Aerith's knowledge remains unsettlingly calm. They each respond to the threat with different forms of strength. Tifa wants to protect Cloud's humanity. Aerith wants to guide the party toward a future where the planet survives. Both goals are tied to preservation, but they come from different kinds of love. One is intimate and immediate. The other is broader, almost cosmic. Barrett, meanwhile, sees the danger in straightforward terms. If Sephiroth and Shinra are both reaching for powers beyond their right, then stopping them is an urgent matter of survival. His practical anger helps keep the story grounded when the mythology grows most abstruse. He reminds the party that the stakes are not symbolic. If the wrong forces gain control of the planet's ancient power, the result will be lived by ordinary people first. The black materia also sharpens the theme of temptation. Power in Final Fantasy VII is rarely innocent. It comes with a cost, and the greatest powers tend to demand the greatest sacrifices. Sephiroth understands this and weaponizes it. He draws others into his orbit by making disaster seem inevitable, then positioning himself as the only being strong enough to survive it. That logic is part of his danger. He does not merely attack, he persuades. The party's pursuit across the world becomes more desperate as a result. They are trying not only to stop Sephiroth from obtaining a catastrophic tool, but to understand how far the line of fate has already shifted. Their enemies are not always visible. Some are hidden in institutions, some in old science, and some in the deepest layers of memory. The black materia is dangerous because it sits at the intersection of all of them. What makes these scenes haunting is the sense that history has been waiting for this conflict to return. The relic is ancient, but the urge to use it is modern. Human greed and cosmic ruin meet at the same point. Rebirth uses this to reinforce its central idea, that the world is held together by memory, and that memory can be weaponized when the wrong hands reach for it. By the time the party draws closer to the next major revelations, the story has become a race against a disaster that feels both old and newly urgent. The black materia is not just an object. It is the shape of a possible end. Chapter 9. The Cost of Knowing. One of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's strongest qualities is its understanding that knowledge itself can wound. The more the party learns, the less secure their certainty becomes. The world's history is not presented as a clean line from beginning to end. It is a web of competing versions, hidden truths, and lives changed by forces too large to fully name. Each answer opens the door to another question. Every discovery adds weight instead of relief. This is especially true for Cloud. His fractured memory makes him vulnerable to every new piece of evidence, every contradiction, every shadow of the past. But his condition is tied to more than confusion. It reflects the game's larger concern with identity and trauma. Cloud has been shaped by shame, failure, experimentation, and a desperate need to become someone better than the person he believes he was. That need made him vulnerable to a borrowed self-image. In moments where he appears most certain, he may be standing on memories that do not fully belong to him. That is why the trust placed in him feels so fragile and so important. The others are not simply following a guide. They are supporting a man who may be built from damage. Cloud's struggle is not only about remembering the past. It is about whether a self can survive after the past has been broken apart and rebuilt in painful ways. Rebirth treats that question with quiet seriousness. It never reduces Cloud to a puzzle to be solved. It shows how deeply a wounded identity can shape every choice he makes. Tifa's relationship to this truth becomes increasingly painful. She understands that the past is unstable. She can see how badly Cloud wants to inhabit an identity that feels strong and complete. Her fear is not only that he is lying, it is that he may believe his own lie so completely that there will be little left to recover. She remains patient even when certainty is missing. That patience gives the story a human center. In a world of secrets, experiments, and cosmic forces, she keeps choosing care. Aerith experiences knowledge in a different way. For her, knowing often means carrying something quietly until the right moment arrives. She does not seem surprised by the uneasy shape of the path ahead. That calm may come from her bond with the planet, or from a sense that the future is already pressing against the present. Either way, it makes her one of the story's most tragic figures. She seems to know enough to be afraid, but not enough to escape what is coming. Red 13 provides a reflective counterpoint. He often speaks like an old soul watching younger lives repeat ancient mistakes. His wisdom is not abstract. He feels the planet's pain as something immediate and living. Through him, the law of rebirth becomes ethical as well as historical. If the world remembers suffering, then those who can remember must act responsibly. He offers the party a way to think about history without becoming trapped inside it. The game's broader structure reinforces this cost of knowing. Each region reveals that the world is layered with unresolved pain. Shinra's science has created consequences it can no longer fully control. Sephiroth's path shows a figure who has moved beyond ordinary revenge into something far more catastrophic. Ancient powers, modern institutions, and personal trauma all feed into the same disaster. The party's awareness of this does not make them safer. It makes them more vulnerable, because now they can see the size of what stands against them. That vulnerability gives the story much of its emotional depth. The characters do not become heroic by mastering the truth. They become heroic by continuing to care after the truth has made life harder. Cloud struggles. Tifa stays beside him. Aerith keeps offering grace. Barrett keeps fighting for the living. Red 13 keeps remembering. Yuffie keeps pushing against oppression with restless, stubborn energy. Their strength is not certainty, it is endurance. Rebirth turns the act of learning into a test of love. What do people owe each other when the truth is unbearable? How much pain can be carried without losing compassion? The game does not answer those questions in a simple way, but it returns to them again and again. In a world where memory can be altered, stolen, or corrupted, remaining faithful to one another becomes its own kind of resistance. Chapter 10. The Road Toward the Gold Saucer. The journey eventually leads to places where sorrow and spectacle stand side by side. The gold saucer is one of the clearest examples. It rises as a bright monument to entertainment, built above the labor and suffering that help sustain it. Its colors, gains, and lights make it feel like a dream of escape. But that dream is still part of the same world of power and hierarchy that governs everything else. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth uses that contrast carefully. Joy appears here, but never apart from consequence. For the party, the gold saucer offers a rare chance to breathe. Even so, the larger pursuit never truly fades from view. Sephiroth's influence remains in the background, and tension continues to move through the group. The area becomes a kind of emotional release, showing how each character handles brief relief. Some laugh more freely, some relax only halfway. Some use the distraction to hide fear that never fully leaves them. This is one of the places where the game lets the company feel like a true ensemble. Their responses to joy are just as revealing as their responses to danger. Cloud's moments here are especially telling. The setting invites simple amusement, but he is still carrying deep uncertainty. He can move through the festivities and take part in scenes that seem light, yet the cracks in his perception remain close beneath the surface. Tifa watches him with a mixture of fondness and worry. Aerith moves through the bright environment with an almost impossible ease, as if she understands how temporary such light can be. Barrett treats the place with suspicion, though even he cannot completely deny its appeal. Yuffie, as always, finds every reason to be excited. The gold saucer also gives room for deeper emotional and story beats about companionship. Rebirth lets the relationships within the party come through not only in conflict, but in shared amusement. Small gestures, private exchanges, and moments of attraction help define who these people are when they are not simply trying to survive. That matters because the story of Final Fantasy VII is built so heavily on trauma. In order to feel the weight of future loss, the audience has to understand the value of present happiness. Outside the glittering attractions, the economic reality of the region is still visible. The gap between the spectacle and the lives that sustain it reflects the wider divide between Shinra's promises and the daily reality of ordinary people. Entertainment becomes another mask for exploitation. Even the brightest places in the world are supported by systems that consume labor and energy. That keeps the story aligned with its environmental and political themes. As the party moves on, Sephiroth's shadow feels heavier. The contrast between joy and dread makes his presence more chilling. He is a force that devalues normal life. Where the gold saucer offers temporary release, he represents the collapse of meaning itself. His drive toward transcendence becomes more detached from the lives around him, as if ordinary human experience no longer matters at all. He is no longer content only to destroy. He wants to reshape the boundaries through which life is understood. Aerith's scenes in this part of the journey quietly prepare the ground for what the party is beginning to fear. She carries herself with a gentle calm that feels more and more like a farewell. The more time the group spends together, the more precious their interactions become, because the game keeps hinting that not all of them will remain. That sense of dread does not remove the joy of the moment, it sharpens it. The road to the gold saucer serves several purposes at once. It broadens the world, it deepens the relationships. It reminds the player that wonder and loss are never far apart. In Rebirth, beauty is not the opposite of tragedy, it is what tragedy threatens. The brighter the place, the more painful it becomes to imagine what might be taken there. Chapter 11. Wutai's Quiet Fire. Yuffie's story gives the game one of its clearest links between personal identity and national history. As a ninja from Wutai, she arrives with confidence, sarcasm, and a hunger to prove herself. But beneath her restless energy is a deep concern for her homeland. Wutai's defeat by Shinra is not ancient history to her. It is a living wound, one that shapes her pride, her impulsiveness, and her desire to recover stolen strength. Her relationship with the rest of the party grows through friction and trust. She is younger than most of them, less burdened by the specific griefs of Midgar, and more willing to charge ahead. That can make her seem unserious, but the game steadily reveals that her bravado protects real loyalty. She wants to matter. She wants Wutai to matter. In a world where Shinra has controlled the narrative for so long, that desire is itself a form of resistance. Wutai's broader significance lies in how it reframes the world's politics. Shinra has not only exploited the planet's energy, it has reshaped the map. Nations have been subdued, traditions weakened, and local power replaced with corporate rule. Through Yuffie, the game makes clear that this loss is not abstract. It affects language, identity, and the confidence of the next generation. She does not carry the burden of history with solemnity. She carries it with motion, trying to outrun power by outmaneuvering it. Her presence also lightens the party in important ways. She brings speed, humor, and surprise into rooms that might otherwise sink under the weight of law. Yet the story never lets her remain a joke for long. Her idealism is tied to a real geopolitical struggle, and her admiration for strength is bound to the hope that Wutai can one day stand as itself again, rather than as a defeated memory in Shinra's empire. The party's interactions with her underscore a major theme of Rebirth, that family can be chosen. Yuffie does not enter the group with the same long history as Tifa and Cloud, or the same spiritual burden as Aerith. She joins by necessity and curiosity, but the others gradually become part of her emotional world. That inclusion matters because the game repeatedly shows how surviving Shinra's system requires new forms of solidarity. The old loyalties have been damaged by war and occupation. New bonds must be built across old divides. Yuffie's perspective also reminds the narrative that not all resistance comes in grim forms. Sometimes it arrives in confidence, speed, and stubborn refusal to be intimidated. Her optimism keeps the group from hardening too quickly. Even when the world grows darker, she remains a reminder that youthful energy can still be a political force. Her hope is not naive, it is defiant. Within the larger lore, her homeland's struggle mirrors the planet's own condition. Just as Wutai was conquered and repurposed, the world itself has been drained and reorganized under Shinra's will. The parallel is deliberate. Local occupation and planetary exploitation are part of the same structure. By connecting them, the story shows that the damage caused by power is never isolated. What happens to one nation echoes in the fate of the entire world. This is why Yuffie matters so much to the broader narrative. She gives human scale to imperial history. She proves that the war against Shinra is not only about reactors and relics. It is about people trying to remember who they are after being told they are smaller than their own inheritance. In her impatience, humor, and fierce pride, the game finds another face for resilience. Chapter 12. The Planet's Wounded Voice. Beneath the struggles of politics, memory, and identity in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth lies an older and quieter story. The planet itself is suffering. This is not simply a backdrop to the journey, it is one of the story's deepest truths. The world of Rebirth is alive, and that life is under strain. The life stream is more than a source of magic or energy, it is the circulation of life, memory, and renewal. It carries what has been lived, what has been lost, and what still has the chance to return. The health of the planet depends on that flow remaining whole. When it is disrupted, the harm is not abstract. It reaches into weather, wildlife, spirit, and the hidden patterns that allow the world to continue. Shinra's Mako extraction is the central wound in this balance. The company draws power from the planet's core without regard for what is being drained away. It treats life as fuel. It treats the living world as something to be used, measured, and replaced. On a cosmic level, this is devastation. But Rebirth keeps that devastation close to the ground. It shows what is lost in places, in creatures, in communities, and in the quiet memory of things that can no longer thrive. Red 13 often gives the clearest voice to this truth. He understands that the planet is alive in a way that human systems refuse to honor. To him, the suffering of the land is not symbolic. It has real consequences. It affects the environment, the flow of life, and the continuity of the spirit. Through Red 13, the story carries a steady ecological conscience. He reminds the others that saving the world is not only about defeating an enemy, it is about preserving the conditions that allow life to continue speaking. Aerith's connection to the planet adds another layer to that idea. She can sense when the world is troubled, and her compassion extends naturally to the living systems around her. As one of the last Cetra, she represents an older way of understanding the world, one based on listening rather than control. The Cetra were not conquerors, they were stewards. They knew how to hear the planet, and in Rebirth, that skill feels almost forgotten. Aerith's gifts are not only magical, they are ethical. She carries a way of being that the world badly needs. The game also suggests that the planet remembers. The places the party crosses are not empty once people have moved on. The land holds impressions. It holds pain. It holds patterns left behind by what came before. This gives the world a lingering presence, as if every region has its own history even when no one is speaking of it. The result is a landscape that feels lived in, marked and watched over by memory itself. That idea reaches Cloud in a particularly painful way. His own memory behaves like a damaged place. It is fractured, altered, and difficult to trust. The echo between Cloud's inner state and the planet's wounds is one of Rebirth's most striking connections. Both have been shaped by violence. Both have been distorted by attempts to force one will over a living system that should never have been controlled in the first place. The planet and Cloud mirror each other in their brokenness. Shinra's exploitation becomes even more frightening through this lens. The company is not simply stealing energy, it is interrupting the exchange that binds all life together. Its reactors, laboratories, and military projects all rest on the same cold belief that the living world is inert matter. Rebirth rejects that belief at every step. Forests, mountains, oceans, animals, and ruins all matter. They are not decoration, they are part of the story. The world is not a background, it is a participant. Sephiroth's goals become especially dangerous in this context. He does not only seek power over people, he aims to seize the system through which life and memory move. That makes him more than a villain opposed to the party. He becomes a threat to the planet's own continuity. His ambition turns collapse into something deliberate, something weaponized, something close to destiny. That is why the stakes feel so absolute. If he succeeds, the damage may not be temporary. It may become permanent. As the party begins to understand these truths, their journey changes. They are no longer only fugitives, fighters, or wanderers. In different ways, they become caretakers of a world that cannot defend itself. Barrett's protectiveness, Tifa's quiet effort to preserve what remains, Aerith's spiritual sensitivity, Red 13's guardianship, Yuffie's loyalty to home, and Cloud's uncertain place among them all begin to point toward the same responsibility. They are learning what it means to stand between life and loss. This is where Rebirth finds some of its deepest sadness. Every beautiful place carries the shadow of what could be taken from it. Every forest path, mountain road, open plain, and distant shoreline feels fragile because the world itself is fragile. The beauty is real, but so is the threat. That tension gives the story its heaviness. It turns the journey into something more than a mission. It becomes a plea for survival, moving through a living, hurting Earth. In the end, Rebirth is haunted not only by what has already been damaged, but by the possibility that the damage could spread. The planet's wounded voice sits beneath everything. It does not speak loudly, but it never stops speaking. And because it is alive, its suffering matters. Chapter 13. Toward Nibelheim. The road eventually turns toward Nibelheim, a place whose name carries immense weight for Cloud, Tifa, and Sephiroth alike. In all of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, few locations feel as tightly bound to memory, loss, and identity. This is the region where the line between what was lived and what was remembered grows thin. It stands at the center of one of the deepest wounds in the entire story. Nibelheim is the town of Cloud and Tifa's childhood. It is also the place where Sephiroth's life began to fracture beyond repair. And it is the site of the fire that turned private history into world-changing tragedy. Nothing about Nibelheim is simple. Even before the player reaches it, the name itself carries the weight of absence, ruin, and unfinished truth. For Tifa, returning here is painful in a quiet and lasting way. Her memories of home are tied to loss, to survival, and to the burden of understanding what happened when everything changed. She remembers Cloud as he was before the larger story began. She remembers the life they had, the people they knew, and the disaster that tore through it all. But Nibelheim also forces her to face how much of that past can no longer be spoken with certainty. The town becomes a place where memory is not only emotional, but fragile. It asks her to stand close to Cloud, while sensing that something about him does not fully fit the boy she remembers. Cloud's response is even more unsettled. Nibelheim reaches into something buried deep inside him, as if the region itself is pressing against the edges of a broken identity. He remains focused, capable, and determined on the surface, but beneath that, his sense of self feels less stable here. The player can feel that his story is not only about forgetting, it is about replacement, confusion, and the uneasy space where one life has been built over another. In Nibelheim, Cloud seems to stand on contested ground within his own mind. Sephiroth's connection to this place is central to his fall. He was once admired as the perfect soldier, a symbol of strength and victory. But in Nibelheim, he discovered truths about his origins and about Genova that shattered the identity he had built for himself. What followed was not just grief, but breakdown. The result was violence, fire, and the first great turning point in the catastrophe that still echoes through the present. Rebirth treats this history with a sense of dread and inevitability. Nibelheim is more than a hometown. It is the birthplace of a wound that spread far beyond it. The town itself reflects that history. Even in moments of stillness, it feels marked by what happened there. The mountains around it rise like silent witnesses. The reactor and nearby facilities bring a sense of industrial intrusion into a place that should have remained small, human, and ordinary. That contrast is part of what makes the setting so unsettling. It shows how easily the extraordinary can be built on top of the everyday, only to crush it. As the party explores the region and the mysteries surrounding it, the contradictions in the story become harder to ignore. The lore of the Nibelheim incident is tied closely to the game's larger themes of memory manipulation, partial truth, and the damage caused by hidden forces. What happened here was traumatic, but it was also distorted. It was misremembered, altered, and buried under conflicting versions of events. Cloud and Tifa carry different pieces of that past, and both of them are incomplete. Their shared history is real, but its shape has been damaged by time and interference. That is what makes Nibelheim one of the strongest emotional and narrative points in the game. It is where the mystery around Cloud can no longer remain in the background. It is where Sephiroth's place in the larger tragedy becomes fully rooted in human loss. And it is where the story's central themes come together most clearly. Family, identity, experimentation, grief, and the danger of ambition without limits. By the time the party moves through this region, the journey has become more than a search. It has become an excavation of the point where all their histories meet. Nibelheim is not only where the past happened, it is where the past refuses to stay buried. Chapter 14. Cosmo Canyon and the Language of Survival. Among the most resonant stops on the journey is Cosmo Canyon, a place where the planet's spiritual and scientific truths meet in a calm, reflective environment. Here, rebirth slows down and allows wisdom to gather. The canyon is home to scholars, guardians, and those who study the life of the planet with reverence. It is a place where the party can temporarily step outside the pace of pursuit and consider the larger pattern of existence. Red 13 is especially at home here. His connection to the canyon deepens his role as a keeper of memory and interpretation. He understands that knowledge of the planet is not an abstract discipline. It is a responsibility. Cosmo Canyon represents the possibility of living in harmony with what the world actually is, rather than treating it as a resource to be used. The environment itself seems to teach that lesson, with its open sky, carved stone, and vast views of the stars. For the party, the canyon provides perspective. Their struggles do not disappear, but they are placed within a longer frame. The planet has endured cycles of damage and recovery before. Ancient knowledge survives because people chose to preserve it, even when the world changed around them. This reinforces one of Rebirth's core ideas, that memory is a kind of survival. Without it, the same mistakes repeat under new names. The canyon also gives space for the emotional dynamics of the party to breathe. Tifa's quiet empathy finds a mirror in the region's gentle wisdom. Aerith's bond with living things feels especially natural here, as if the land itself acknowledges her presence. Cloud remains difficult to read, but the stillness exposes his instability in a new way. He is often most haunted when the world around him is peaceful, because there is less noise to distract from the fractures inside him. The lore of the planet is made clearer in places like this. The life stream is not just source energy, it is an accumulated presence of lives lived and remembered. The Cetra once understood this more fully than modern humans do. Their legacy has been obscured by war, industry, and time, but it continues through places like Cosmo Canyon, where respect for the planet has not been entirely lost. That respect contrasts sharply with Shinra's extractive logic. The canyon also strengthens the theme of inheritance. The party is walking through a world shaped by people who came before them, and their choices will matter for those who come after. The wisdom of the canyon lies in accepting that life is both transient and shared. No one owns the land, but everyone leaves an imprint on it. That understanding gives the story an almost spiritual humility. Rebirth uses this location to remind the audience that survival is not merely the endurance of the strong. It is the continuation of a relationship with the world that refuses to reduce it to utility. Cosmo Canyon stands for that relationship. It is a place where people listen before they take, and where the stars seem less like symbols than reminders of scale. For the party, the visit becomes a necessary pause in a journey that often feels like a rush toward disaster. It is a chance to remember that the world contains more than conflict. There are still spaces of reverence, teaching, and quiet wonder. Those spaces matter because they are what the heroes are trying to preserve. Chapter 15. The Long Reach of Sephiroth. As the journey nears its turning point, Sephiroth becomes less a recurring threat and more a constant pressure on the story's shape. He is the force around which uncertainty gathers. His appearances carry not just menace, but inevitability, as if the party is being drawn into a design that has already taken form long before they arrived. Rebirth leans into this dread. Sephiroth is not merely waiting at the end of the road. He seems to be authoring parts of it from the shadows. His significance in the lore is immense. Once the pinnacle of Shinra's soldier program, Sephiroth was celebrated as a hero, a weapon, and a symbol of human success. The revelation that he was tied to Jenova, that his origins were contaminated by experimentation and alien intrusion, shattered everything he understood about himself. What followed was not simply madness. It was a rejection of the world that had made him, and a decision to turn his pain outward into apocalypse. That transformation makes him one of the most tragic villains in modern gaming history. Rebirth preserves that tragedy while deepening the mystery around his current intentions. He seems to know more than any mortal should. He moves with confidence through systems of time, memory, and spiritual influence that no one else can fully see. Whether this is because of Jenova, the life stream, or some new manipulation of reality, the effect is the same. He can reach into Cloud's mind and destabilize the boundaries that keep the party's understanding of the world intact. Cloud's connection to Sephiroth is the most distressing aspect of this reach. The two are linked by trauma, memory, and the unresolved damage of the past. Sephiroth uses that connection like a blade. He does not merely attack Cloud physically, he turns Cloud's own uncertainty against him. That makes every encounter deeply personal. Cloud is not just facing a strong enemy, he is facing the embodiment of everything that has made his identity fragile. Tifa and Aerith respond to Sephiroth from opposite emotional directions, yet both are crucial. Tifa wants to hold Cloud in the reality she remembers, hoping truth and familiarity can keep him from being swallowed by falsehood. Aerith seems to grasp the larger danger, sensing that Sephiroth's ambitions extend to the planet itself and perhaps beyond. One protects the self, the other protects the world. Together, they frame the scale of what is at stake. Barrett, Red 13, and Yuffie each bring their own form of resistance. Barrett refuses to let Sephiroth's mythic presence erase the basic need to fight. Red 13 recognizes the threat as one to the planet's living order. Yuffie responds with restless defiance, unwilling to let some grand villain dominate the fate of her homeland and her companions. The diversity of their responses matters because Sephiroth's power is designed to isolate. The party's unity is the thing that resists him. The game's most unsettling achievement here is how it turns destiny into something both intimate and oppressive. Sephiroth's long reach is not only about events on a global scale, it is about the pressure he exerts on trust, memory, and choice. He makes the future feel predetermined, and the hero's struggle becomes the effort to prove that it is not. That effort is emotionally exhausting, but it defines the path forward. Rebirth does not offer easy victory over its central antagonist. Instead, it prepares the audience for the recognition that to confront Sephiroth is to confront the deepest fractures in self and world alike. The closer the party gets to him, the more the story feels like it is approaching a storm already written into the sky. Chapter 16. Toward the Forgotten Capital. As Rebirth enters its final movement, the journey grows heavy with feeling, as the party makes its way toward the Forgotten Capital. Even the name carries the weight of old civilizations, lost promises, and memories that have sunk beneath the surface of time. It is a place wrapped in legend and sorrow, as if the world itself has been holding still for this moment. The road there feels different from everything that came before. The party is no longer simply searching for answers or following scattered clues. They are moving toward an event that seems to have been waiting for them from the beginning. Aerith becomes especially important in this stretch of the story. Her bond with the planet, her awareness of the danger ahead, and her gentle compassion all take on a quieter, more fragile tone. She is one of the emotional centers of the game, but she is also the character most closely tied to the fate of the world. That gives her scenes a sense of tenderness that is hard to separate from grief. She understands more than she says, and even when the others do not fully grasp the meaning of her knowledge, she carries that burden with calm grace. In these moments, her kindness feels inseparable from the sadness that surrounds her. Cloud, meanwhile, remains unstable and vulnerable to Sephiroth's influence. He seems to sense danger, but never with enough clarity to act with confidence. He moves through these events as if part of him is still not fully awake. That uncertainty deepens the tension around him, especially for Tifa. Her fear for Cloud becomes more and more difficult to bear because she can feel that something essential in him is slipping away. The history they share feels thinner now, as though the ground beneath it is starting to give way. Every step toward the Forgotten Capital carries the question of whether Cloud can stay present long enough to matter when it counts most. The rest of the party feels the pressure as well. Barrett, Red 13, and Yuffie all understand that this road is ending in a place where simple planning may no longer be enough. The mood shifts from travel to expectation, from uncertainty to dread. The pieces of the larger story begin to lock together here. The Cetra, the life stream, the black materia, and Sephiroth's long plan all converge in one narrowing path. What was once a wide and wandering journey now closes in on a single, terrible point. The Forgotten Capital itself carries the echo of an ancient duty that was never fully completed. It feels like the remains of a civilization that once lived in greater harmony, now lost beneath water, ruin, and passing centuries. For a story so focused on memory, it is an especially fitting place. The past is not gone here. It is submerged, waiting, still present in a way that cannot be ignored. The heroes are not simply entering a location. They are stepping into a threshold between remembering and losing, between what can still be saved and what may already be slipping away. This final part of Rebirth sharpens the game's central themes. Preservation begins to blur into sacrifice. Knowledge becomes a burden. Love turns into urgency. The story asks what it means to protect the future when so much may already be in motion and impossible to stop. Aerith's role, Cloud's instability, and Sephiroth's relentless pursuit all converge with a sense of inevitability that feels both tragic and unfair. The path ahead is not just dangerous, it is emotionally prepared, as if the world has been quietly arranging these pieces for a long time. The approach to the forgotten capital is less like a march and more like a deepening silence. The world seems to understand what is coming. The party senses it too, even if each of them feels it in a different way. They have traveled through laughter, loss, conflict, and revelation. Now the road leads them into the part of the story where those feelings can no longer be set aside. By this point, Rebirth has made its law clear. The planet is alive. Memory can be wounded. Identity can be taken apart. Ancient powers can be twisted by those who refuse to accept the limits of mortality. The forgotten capital stands as the place where all of those truths are brought together at once. It is a place of silence, history, and waiting, and it marks the end of one kind of journey and the beginning of something much harder to face. Chapter 17. Endings, Echoes, and the Road Ahead. The conclusion of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth carries the full weight of the series' most famous tragedy, while also reshaping it into something emotionally complex and uncertain. As the story reaches its final moments, the party's long journey through the wider world, their growing bonds, and their confrontation with Sephiroth all converge in a sequence that emphasizes grief, memory, and the limits of understanding. The game does not end on simple resolution. It ends on impact, on absence, and on the unsettling sense that the world has changed in ways the survivors cannot fully grasp. Aerith's role in the ending is central and heartbreaking. Her connection to the planet, her quiet courage, and her place in the broader myth of the Cetra make her one of the story's most cherished figures. The ending treats her with reverence and pain, preserving the feeling that she stands at the intersection of life, memory, and the planet's own will. The result is a farewell that is at once intimate and cosmic. Her loss is not only personal, it resonates through the lore of the entire world. Cloud's response is one of the most tragic parts of the ending. His fractured sense of reality, already strained throughout the game, collides with the event in a way that makes his experience difficult to hold on to with certainty. Rebirth leans into ambiguity here, letting emotion and perception overlap until the boundary between what happened and what Cloud can bear to accept becomes unstable. That instability is not a trick, it is the point. Cloud's mind cannot simply absorb what his heart refuses. The surviving members of the party are left carrying more than memory. They carry trauma, unfinished purpose, and the certainty that Sephiroth's threat has not ended. If anything, it has grown more dangerous. The ending confirms that the larger struggle for the planet is still unfolding, and that the next stage of the journey will demand even more from those who remain. Yet the final mood is not empty despair. It is grief held together by love, duty, and the memory of companionship. This is what gives Rebirth its lasting emotional shape. It is a story about crossing a world only to discover that the deepest distances are inside the self. It is about learning that history can be altered, but not erased. It is about the planet as a living body, the life stream as memory, and the bonds between people as the one force capable of resisting complete ruin. Cloud, Tifa, Barrett, Aerith, Red 13 and Yuffie all stand as different answers to the same question. How do people continue when the world has been wounded? The answer in Rebirth is not perfection. It is endurance. It is loyalty under strain. It is the decision to keep walking even when the path no longer promises safety. The ending leaves that decision alive. The road ahead remains uncertain, but the party has already proven that they can face a world larger and stranger than the one they came from. As a chapter in the Final Fantasy VII saga, Rebirth expands the mythology, deepens the characters, and transforms a classic tale of resistance into a meditation on memory and continuity. It honors the legacy of the original while giving this new version its own distinct emotional shape. The story ends as all great journeys do in this universe, with loss, with lingering questions, and with a fragile promise that the next step still matters. Even in sorrow, the world continues to breathe. Even in absence, the bond between those who traveled together remains. And in that quiet persistence, Rebirth finds its true closing note.